Hey Tom, fuck you. You ruined Silent Hill, fucking up shit in Silent Hill 3 with the new voice. I'm offended that you did this. Why did you ruin it?
Fuck you, Tom. You think you have all the answers about Silent Hill when you don't know a fucking shit. Fuck off already and die.
I hate that kneecap face called Tomm Hulett.
Tomm Hulett, please take you SHHD collection and shove it down you throat so you can die a slow and painful death, you son of a bitch!
Dear Tomm Hulett, you, sir, are an idiot who thinks himself a wise man.
Dear
What
Mr.
you have
Tom
done
Hulett,
with
I'm sure I'm
Silent
not the
Hill
only
is
one
laughable
messaging you about
and
this
pitiful.
podcast.
You have taken
Tomm Hulett.
Tomm Hulett.
Tomm Hulett.
Tomm Hulett.
We are in the home of Tomm Hulett right now. You want the mic?
Yes. I am done with it. No hyperbole.
God, I've been wanting to do that to him for a long time now. And I think we can all agree Silent Hill's going to be better off without this shitbag fucking it up for every one of us.
Tomm Hulett. If you're a diehard fan of the Silent Hill games, chances are you know the name. And if you do, chances are it conjures visceral negative emotions in you. After all, this is the man who single-handedly destroyed Silent Hill. His hubris, influence, and wrong-headedness poisoned one of the greatest horror series of all time.
But what if all that was wrong? What if one of the most vilified people in gaming, who still gets death threats to this day despite having left Konami over 5 years ago, was a victim of rampant misinformation, incorrect assumptions, and overzealous fans? What if the worst thing you could say about Tomm Hulett, the biggest crime he's guilty of, was that he cared about his job?
Before we start, let's be clear about our intentions here. This video isn't about defending Tomm Hulett's creative decisions for Silent Hill titles he worked on. Those are matters of opinion.
To be honest, I pretty much really fervently hate Shattered Memories. A lot.
Right now, this is the same feeling, the same frustration that I felt in LPing Shattered Memories because I was baffled and angry that anybody could like this drivel.
So let's get the accusations of sycophantry out of the way. This video is about providing context for why creative decisions around later Silent Hill titles were made, as well as dispelling the vast amount of misinformation surrounding Tomm's days at Konami.
No one will be blindly defending anyone in this video. Rather, we'll be making the important distinction between creators and their creations, addressing misconceptions about the creative process, and examining the one-sided, distorted relationship creators have with their audience.
First, a quick rundown. For the uninitiated, Silent Hill is a video game series developed by Konami in 1999. It was widely praised and often called Konami's response to Capcom's Resident Evil series, which came out 3 years prior. But it differed in a few major ways. Both games were survival horror, but where Resident Evil focused more on action, Silent Hill focused more on story and psychological scares. The first 4 Silent Hill games were developed internally at Konami by a group dubbed Team Silent in Tokyo. After the release of Silent Hill 4 in 2004, Konami decided to stop using this team to develop Silent Hill titles in favor of external developers.
Not that it was a consistent team, by the way. Members dropped out starting from the first game.
But in the same way that we still call bands the same name despite changing members over time, we all call this group Team Silent.
It's important to note that up until this point, the Silent Hill series had very Japanese horror sensibilities. The first 4 Silent Hill games are defined by their focus on psychological scares, esoteric puzzles, and disturbing subject matter. While other genres of horror are capable of containing all of these traits, J-horror is generally perceived as having a better track record with them compared to American horror. This will come into play later.
Coming from a job at Atlus, leading game projects like Steambot, Chronicles, and Trauma Center, as well as localizing games in the Shin Megami Tensei series, Tomm Hulett was hired by Konami's American branch as an associate producer in late 2006. Not long after his arrival, he was thrust into providing feedback for 2 new Silent Hill titles that were being worked on by outside developers, Silent Hill Origins and Silent Hill Homecoming. While Tomm's role on Origins was merely providing feedback for what developer Climax had already been working on before his arrival, his role on Homecoming was considerably more dynamic.
To understand why this was the case, you first need to know that Tomm is a Silent Hill fan. Before being hired by Konami, he had bought every single Silent Hill game on release day and beat them within a week. He's particularly fond of Silent Hill 2 and considers it in his top 3 games of all time. Here's Tom talking about that on the podcast Cane and Rinse in May of 2017.
You're a big fan of Silent Hill 2, presumably, coming into
yes.
this situation.
So, yeah,
right.
I played all of them on release, and 2 obviously was very important and sort of changed my ideas about what a game narrative could do and be.
So when Tom came to Konami and learned that the series that spawned Silent Hill 2, a game that many consider to be a horror masterpiece, was having a trilogy made that mangled series canon, brought back characters from the first and second games for no reason other than fan service, ended with a Super Saiyan fight between 2 kids over control of the town, and would disparage the clout the series had garnered, Tom did what any Silent Hill fan would do. He flipped out.
I was very upset. My very first job, I read through Homecoming's design stuff, and I thought, Pyramid Head should not be here. This is terrible. Let's get Pyramid Head out at any cost.
Yeah.
And then I got shot down. The dev said, this is our Silent Hill. And my producer said, it's their Silent Hill. So I was very sad. I was locked out of the project by the producer, and he stopped communicating with other people. And so then he was made to leave, and Homecoming was about ready to come out, and it was dumped in my lap, and I had to finish it.
Tom's position at Konami was initially associate producer and later changed to senior associate producer, which seems to be the same job, but, senior. A producer on a project is generally the person in charge of organizing everything, like making schedules and dealing with finances. Depending on the project and company, a producer's influence can be shifted to something comparable to a director, aka the person in charge of a project's direction, and the final word on creative input, or shifted to simply making sure everyone's getting paid. In Tom's case, Konami gave its producers a lot of creative freedom.
We actually asked Tom about his role when he was still working with Konami years ago.
So my responsibilities on a project are normally a little bit of everything. I have to have a hand in all the various parts of development and production. And this ranges from the scheduling, planning, budgeting type stuff, where I'm doing the boring paperwork. And at Konami, being a producer also involves a lot of creative input. So I might, depending on the project, I might be doing initial designs, concepts, and then obviously working with the developer, overseeing development.
Because of this, one may be tempted to think that Tom had a considerable amount of power on a project, but this isn't entirely true. Tom was technically an associate producer, meaning there was another producer who was above him. See, Tom worked for a large company with many people, and he was simply nowhere near the top of the food chain.
There's plenty of people above me, producers, directors, VPs, the president. And that goes for every department and every region of Konami around the world.
So Tom could be vetoed on creative decisions or pushed to work on games with specific requirements to their staff, gameplay, and budget, among other things. He was getting to make games just with a bunch of caveats, but Tom would learn to deal with it, and eventually he'd get the go-ahead to work on one of his passion projects.
When Tom first arrived at Konami, he had the opportunity to pitch upper management some games he would like to produce. One of those games was a Silent Hill title for the Wii, utilizing the console's motion controls, but Konami passed on it. However, the lead producer of Silent Hill at the time, the guy behind the Homecoming trilogy, learned of Tom's idea and adopted it. Homecoming trilogy guy shopped the idea around to several developers, one of which created a demo for it. N-Space's Winter was that demo, and the Silent Hill influence is pretty obvious, as you can see in the footage they leaked after Konami eventually passed on it.
Simultaneously, Climax, the company in charge of Silent Hill Origins, was working with Homecoming Trilogy Guy to create a port of Silent Hill 1 for the Wii. At some point, Homecoming Trilogy Guy showed N-Space's Winter concept to Climax, which they used as an influence for their project. See, Climax didn't really want to do a port. They considered them boring. When Konami reached out to them to figure out what had become of the Silent Hill 1 port project, Climax responded with Silent Hill Cold Heart.
Cold Heart, as seen in these leaked design documents, was an original story about a woman named Jessica Chambers who gets caught in a snowstorm on her way to visit her parents, forcing her to find refuge in Silent Hill. It's got some neat ideas. You should read the pitch doc if you find the time. Climax took Tom's idea of a Wii Silent Hill game and ran with it, coming up with concepts for Wiimote-based puzzles and combat with a focus on survival. Konami management saw this and liked it, but stuck to their guns on wanting a port of Silent Hill 1. The compromise ended up taking most of the concepts of Cold Heart, the Wiimote-based puzzles, the emphasis on snow and the cold, and psychologically profiling players and tailoring the game to them, and merging them with the characters and setting of Silent Hill 1, essentially retelling the game. The The project was greenlit, and Silent Hill Shattered Memories was born, and shortly after, Homecoming Trilogy guy stopped responding to Konami management and was made to leave the company.
Shattered Memories would become one of the better received American Silent Hill titles, though still not as embraced as the original 3. This is for various reasons, one of which was that some fans took umbrage with the idea that Shattered Memories was a reimagining of the first Silent Hill. To them, this was an incursion, proof positive of the Americanization of Silent Hill and its shedding of the series' Japanese roots, by foregoing a port or remaster of the first Silent Hill in favor of dramatically changing it into something that they barely recognized. To these fans, Shattered Memories was a metaphor for where the entire series was heading, and they didn't like it.
Climax. You change the story, you change the characters, you change the town, you change the gameplay, you change the controls, you change the monsters, you change the nightmare, you change the reason for the nightmare, and you change the overall message. So you tell me, in what way is this a Silent Hill game?
Some of these fans were a YouTube channel called Twin Perfect, who had a video series called The Real Silent Hill Experience, in which they reviewed Silent Hill games and their lore. This channel would become a major player in scapegoating Tomm Hulett. At this point, Tomm had taken on the role of public relations for the Silent Hill series, talking about Shattered Memories with game journalists and fielding questions about the franchise. He explained that decision in the same interview he did with us years back.
The reason that I try to be involved in interviews and PR and stuff is because somebody has to do that. Somebody has to talk about the game. And as a gamer growing up, I always didn't like when you'd read like, oh, it's a cool new interview about this game. And then, you open the magazine or click on the link to see it. And it's basically a PR person reading off bullet points from a spreadsheet they have, like, oh, this is why people want to play the game. It's got RPG battle system, and it's multiplayer, and I guess that's it. It's not their job to know, like, the intricacies of development and how this all came about, but I think that's more interesting to hear about. And then, as I said before, I work a little bit on every Silent Hill, so I'm kind of the guy if they're going to have random questions about lore, so it's kind of better I'm involved than not involved. I've been playing it since 1999, so I saw all that lore as a gamer and figured out all the lore behind the town and did all that research for years and years and years and years. So I'm going to know it off the top of my head.
It's because of this public-facing role as one of the few people at Konami talking about Silent Hill that people like Twin Perfect began to connect the perceived ruination of the series with Tomm. Twin Perfect would then come out with a video about Shattered Memories, and Tomm found himself portrayed as just another Konami suit who didn't get Silent Hill.
This is how Tomm Hulett, the game's producer, and Sam Barlow explain what a reimagining entails.
Well, I want you to look at Nolan's Dark Knight and Burton's Batman. Both feature game capable creator we all know for fighting whose greatest nemesis, the Joker. Both have love interests, both have Harvey Dent and Commissioner Gordon, but how similar are the two movies really?
The example Hulett gives is a good one, but how Shazam is a reimagining of Silent Hill we don't know.
They look to the previous games to decide what Silent Hill was about, and concrete things were brought over. Silent Hill must be about Rust Fog and Pyramid Head nurses and creepy little kids, but Silent Hill isn't about any of those things. That's why Shattered Memories is important.
Well, Silent Hill isn't about frickin' amnesia either, Tomm.
After this, Tomm reached out to Twin Perfect and participated in some debate about Silent Hill lore, likely to form a bridge of communication with fellow fans as well as show that he was really just one of them. This ended up backfiring, as fans would take his innocent participation in the debate as proof that he had no idea what he was talking about, when Twin Perfect presented his friendly conversation as a stubborn and defensive retort.
You may ask, if Silent Hill takes place in one dimension, why don't the monsters go around attacking people? If Alyssa triggered the darkness of Silent Hill in the singular real-world dimension, creating monsters, how did James and Mary have a pleasant vacation stay there years later, without being attacked?
Maybe you didn't ask that question, but Tomm Hulett did. You're in charge of Silent Hill, and that's the question you ask?
Remember, Tomm Hulett was not completely in charge of Silent Hill. He just seemed like it because fans saw him talking a lot about the games, which is a mistake being made by some Silent Hill fans to this day, in no small part due to Twin Perfect's videos. Beforehand, generalized hatred of the corporate entity known as Konami for their handling of Silent Hill was the norm. After these videos, that hatred was being redirected at Tomm, and while that hostility seemed excessive at the time, it would pale in comparison to what would come later.
On June 7th, 2011, at Konami's E3 press conference, it was revealed that an HD remaster of Silent Hill 2 and 3 was in the works, complete with new voice acting. This understandably frustrated die-hard fans. Sure, the voice acting in the original games wasn't perfect.
Heather. I'm looking for someone.
Claudia? What about her?
I hate you, I hate you, I hate you!
Happy birthday to you!
You snotty little brat! Open up! The memory of his cruelty is forever burned into my mind.
Lost?
Leave us both the hell alone! Ah! I'll kill you, James! Heather, go ahead and kill this crazy bitch!
But these were the voices fans had been listening to for years. They were iconic to us. So why was Konami going to great lengths to re-record these games with new voice actors?
It turned out that Guy Seehee, the original voice actor for Silent Hill 2's protagonist James Sunderland, had confronted Konami and claimed that he was owed residuals for his voice and mocap performances in all versions of Silent Hill 2, saying on his Facebook,
"The problem is that Konami has already been notified they owe me residuals for all previous reuses of my mocap and voice recordings."
Here's Tom explaining what happened next.
There wasn't an issue with the voice recording rights, but Konami is a very conservative, careful company. And so they sent out a notification to all the voice actors, and they worded it in an ambiguous way. So some of the actors questioned if they should get more money for the reuse of their voices. They shouldn't. That's not how contracts are made. So with voices in games. I know it's different for cartoons and movies, but that, games are, we own the files that are your voice.
Yeah.
So my boss then came to me and said, we can't use the old voices. We're going to change all the voices. And I went, you don't want to do that. And they said, well, we have to. So I said, if you are going to redo the voices, which is a terrible idea, I want to be in charge of that so I can make them good. So we will have good voices and people will still be mad, but they will be good.
So Konami didn't have written agreements with the original Silent Hill 2 and 3 voice actors. They had verbal agreements instead. Also worth mentioning is a comment made by Micheal Guinn, the voice actor for Harry Mason from the first Silent Hill game, in a recent interview with Rely on Horror. When asked if his name was shortened in the credits due to the voice work in Silent Hill being a non-union job or something, he replied,
"No, not at all. It had nothing to do with union. When I signed a record contract with CBS Sony, they felt my last name, Gwen, was going to be too hard for the Japanese to say. There was no union there. Your union was only as good as your management was. After that, I heard they were making foreign artists sign contracts. I don't know if that was true. That's just what I heard."
We don't know exactly what Micheal means by after that, because we don't know how much time after that really is. But the point here is that we have another person saying that they did not have an individual VO contract with Konami, at least not in 1998 and 99. This sounds crazy to those of us outside of the Japanese game industry, but not having contracts between individual talents and businesses was actually a common business practice in Japan at the time, as Jeremy Blaustein, Silent Hill 2's localizer and translator, explained to us in an interview many years ago.
At the time, almost certainly contracts were viewed as things done between entities, companies. So Konami would sign some sort of a contract between an agency, maybe. In the case of Silent Hill 2, they were working with me and my partner at the time. And, the money funneled through us. We got the money for auditions and we paid off these people and paid off these people. And, nobody cared about contracts. We would say to the actors, okay, here's how much you're going to get. And we get your voices, right? And they'd say, yeah, okay, we got the voices. There was never anything beyond that. It was understood by all the actors that there were buyouts. Everything was a buyout. Their agencies explained those things to them. We explained those things to them. We never felt like we were going to have any problems. And then after it was done, of course, even less thought was given to it than before because we had made the game. So it kind of just, slipped under the bridge. Obviously, they wouldn't have done the jobs if they weren't happy with the money they got. And then once we had them doing the jobs, we really didn't think about it because Japanese people don't sue each other. In retrospect, it's pretty naive to think that foreigners aren't going to be that way. It's a little naive, but yeah, so we didn't have contracts with the actors individually. We had contracts with the agencies and that sort of thing. Since the agencies had a relationship or a contract with the actors, it was assumed that it was all good. And we had verbal understandings that they were all buyouts for the voices, period, end of story.
I know this is a lot of information to take in, but it's important to truly understand what was happening with this voice acting dispute and how it reflected on Tomm Hulett in the eyes of fans. Here was Guy Seehee, voice of the main character of many fans' favorite game of all time, saying that Konami, the company that was seemingly out to make every terrible decision regarding the Silent Hill IP that they could, was screwing him over and not paying him money that he was owed. And there was Tomm, the for all intents and purposes representative of that terrible company. To many Silent Hill fans, all this made the most sense in the world. The whole David versus Goliath angle just felt right.
But in reality, there were signs that Guy Seehee might not have been as honest with fans as they would have liked to believe. In fact, Guy regularly contradicted himself during the voice acting dispute, the prime example of which being when he initially said this on his Facebook.
The problem is that Konami has already been notified they owe me residuals for all previous reuses of my mocap and voice recordings. Hope this doesn't bum you guys out, it's just the way it is.
But in the end, when Guy waived his rights and let Konami reuse his SH2 performance, he said,
"My problem with Konami has never been about money."
See, it was all about the money, but then it was never about the money. We actually talked to Guy Seehee about all of this and more. That interview you can find here and in the video description, but he declined to answer a lot of our questions regarding the HD collection dispute. He instead told us to talk to another person to get an unbiased view of what had happened.
There was a guy named Micheal who also ran a blog. He at least, I think he would give a neutral perspective, and mine's not going to be neutral. I'm on the side of me and the other actors, but I'm not going to speak for them. I can only speak about uncontroversial things.
So we talked to Micheal. He's the owner of Silent Haven, a blog he made in 2010 dedicated to Silent Hill. In 2011, when the voice acting dispute was happening, Micheal had become friends with Guy Seehee and Jeremy Blaustein, and was acting as a sort of mediator between the two. See, Guy Seehee absolutely loathed Jeremy Blaustein, for reasons that are unclear. This made getting Guy to cooperate whenever Jeremy was involved an arduous task, which exacerbated the voice acting dispute, because Jeremy was the person who was getting the Silent Hill 2 voice actors to actually call Tomm and Konami to hash things out. Eventually, Guy let Konami use his voice and performance in the HD collection, but that wasn't the end of the feud, as Micheal explains.
Guy was like a ticking bomb at that time. He was kind of like, you didn't want to say something that would piss him off, because then it was like, oh, game over. You know, and he kind of made me feel that way. Actually, a lot of the times, there was even a time where he actually threatened me because when he finally did sign, I thanked a lot of people, and the first person I thanked was Guy, and then Dave, and then I thanked the rest of the voice actors and Jeremy for getting the voice actors together and even scouting some of the rare ones or hard to find ones. And that pissed Guy off so much that he actually threatened to, he said actually, let me see if I can find it here, but he said something about, if you don't remove this, I'm going to show you the dark side, or I'm going to cause anger, or something like that. Something to that effect. And I just was kind of like, wow, this is, and he was actually counting down in our conversation. Because I was trying to tell him, I'm not trying to piss you off. I'm not trying to cause harm. I'm thanking everybody who contributed to this resolution. And he was patronizing in many ways as he would count down, trying to get me to remove this thank you I did on my personal Facebook. I didn't put it on my blog. It was just a personal thank you because these people were my friends. They were on my friends list, and I wanted them to see that I was thanking them. And it was so, I don't know, I guess it was a controlling thing, or if it was, he just hated Jeremy so much.
Despite all of this, Tomm and producer Devin Shatsky still fought with Konami management to bring the original voice acting back to Silent Hill 2 for the HD collection. And with the help of Jeremy Blaustein, Michael Arnold, and all of the original SH2 voice actors, including Guy, that goal was eventually accomplished. Unfortunately, the same can't be said with Silent Hill 3, but at least SH2 had the original voices as an option. But why this much time and effort to achieve something barely anyone at Konami wanted? Jeremy Blaustein had some thoughts on that.
This was a fan service that Tomm was really trying to get done. When you're in an organization like this, believe me, what Tomm did, getting them in there, I consider nothing less than almost a kind of a miracle of a Herculean effort that he must have gone through to get that done. When you're in an organization like Konami and you have to make these rusty wheels move, even the faintest movement is a tremendous lot of effort, and I can only imagine how much Tomm must have pushed to get that much done. The path of least resistance is what normally happens, and so anything extra just takes 1,000 times more effort than it should to get anything moving. And Tomm's in a pretty low level position.
Look, the reason we're talking about what really happened behind the scenes with the HD Collection voice acting dispute isn't to reopen old drama. We want people to understand what really happened. It's not that Guy Seehee bravely fought against the ego-driven, game-wrecking Tomm Hulett. It's more like the other way around. Tomm Hulett tried the best he could to undo the legal kerfuffle caused by Konami and Guy Seehee.
All that being said, please do not misconstrue this as some sort of call to action to harass Guy Seehee instead of Tomm Hulett. We do not intend to say, here's the real bad guy, go get him. We absolutely, full stop, do not want anybody to harass Guy Seehee. Anyone who does that is a real jerk. We repeat, do not harass Guy Seehee.
We want people to know how much time and effort Tomm and others put into something that many would consider to be an afterthought. And the whole purpose for doing it was to please the fans and preserve an integral piece of horror gaming history for another generation of players.
Which makes it such a shame when the Silent Hill HD collection was finally released. And, well...
Hey, Tom. Fuck you! Making that sound really made me throw up. Jesus.